Welcome to another episode of Corporate CPR, where we breathe life back into your organization, projects, and processes, giving you insights to recovery and avoiding corporate mortality events. Today, we'll be talking about aligning your organization to accelerate your strategic goals, and joining us to contribute to the conversation is Nishika de Rosairo. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Anna. So great to be here.
You want to share a little bit about your background?
I would love to. So my background is, well, I got to grow up all over the world, actually, which was really interesting. But the most interesting part about growing up in Africa, Asia, Australasia, and then the US was really around learning human dynamics and foundational needs at a psychological level. And so I've always been fascinated with what it takes to build humans, unlock their potential, and really allow them to be at that next level of purpose and impact, driving their best lives and their best careers. And I've got to see kind of the common threads, the things that are unique to different cultures. But what keeps drawing me into this space time and time again is how similar we are and how much of the same things we actually need to be successful. And so this is really my calling in life, why I'm on earth. What I'm doing is really, the stuff that I love around elevating people and their game and unlocking human potential. And we get to do that through HumanQ.
Excellent. And so obviously you've spent a lot of time studying people, and I think one of the things that companies often struggle with, especially as they get larger, when you have, multiple leaders and multiple, levels in your hierarchy, that it's hard to keep everybody flowing the same direction. Is that what you found?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. What's amazing about small companies is that they have so much rigor and alignment, but then as companies grow, they start to become more siloed, right? Because you become a specialized agent in the thing that your department does. And then as silos create, the more we don't flow and the more misalignment there is, and the more there is lack of collaboration, and the potential for innovation starts to kind of decrease unless we actively put together, innovation teams and so on. And so what we think about in terms of like really enabling an organization to be successful is, what are the building blocks? Like, where do people need to be able to be aligned in order to move forward? And I often think about a flow of birds, and when they fly in that V, what's so fascinating about that is there's this bird leading the front of the V, but they have to keep like the right amount of space so that their wings don't flap on each other. They somehow drive the momentum of the whole V together, not just the person leading. And then they take turns, like someone from the back comes to the front and they start kind of, repopulating in a different V throughout that journey. And so for humans to be super successful in organizations, and organizations to get to their corporate goals in a accelerated, coherent, consistent, scalable way, it takes kind of tactic and thought and intention around keeping that V together, which means extreme alignment, extreme collaboration, communication, increasing purpose, engagement, breaking silos, all of that within the organization.
Well, obviously that sounds a lot easier than it really is in practice. So, what are some of the first tips, I guess, in driving that alignment?
Yeah, I think we make it complicated, which is the interesting part, because technically, when people have good access to good information and they understand what their charter is, we're all smart people. They get to do what they do best, and you really unlock them. And I think we make it complicated because we focus on the wrong things. We focus on the technology project, the new SAP system or the new financial planning system or whatever we're going to use, but we don't focus on enabling people to actually be successful as part of that new technology program or project. And so the way we kind of prioritize in organizations, we don't prioritize people as much as we should and could. I think COVID was this time of sort of emergence where people started to say, well, the needs of the average employee are so much more than we ever thought they were. And they came to the forefront in a much more deliberate manner. So companies started to prioritize it a bit more. Some of them fell off the wagon, others are still doing it, but we make it more complicated than it is. At HumanQ, for example, I mean, we're obviously not the size of a Accenture that has 800,000 employees, or a Walmart that has 2.3 million employees. But, we think about like enablement happening with the person first. Like, how do you unlock the person to be their best self, to think bigger, to connect dots so that they can seek the information they need? And then on top of that, how do we build systems? How do we build processes, right? So if we think about our humans as the base layer, the foundation where our biggest investment should be, then we get it right. The moment we stop thinking about it that way, which is what most organizations do, we start to overcomplicate things, and then we've got a back channel to figure it out and to kind of construct what good looks like and what a less complicated employee purpose-driven organization looks like.
And so how do you, I mean, let's talk to the leader then right now. If they're a leader in the organization, how do they even begin to, unlock potential and maybe even understand what that actually means and entails?
Really great question. So it starts with strategic priorities. Every leader has a set of priorities that they're focused on. That's their charter. And so the question becomes, are your people equipped to fulfill those charters, right? Like, are they ready to go there? Like, what's lacking? What's the opportunity? How do we need to prepare them to actually go do that thing with maybe a smaller team because of layoffs, maybe with a team who's just not as experienced, or they have experience in some areas, severely lacking in others, but really doing an analysis. We call it a discovery session around kind of what are your corporate priorities? Where are your people? What is it going to take to get there? And then purposely designing really outcomes around what does success look like if they got there? What are the challenges they would overcome? And what are the metrics that you would want to track? And then everything in between of how you do that. For us, it's group coaching. And what we use is, everyone's familiar with coaching in some way, shape, or form, but that's also the problem. Coaching has such a broad kind of meaning. It could mean, having a life coach. It could mean having a career coach, a physical fitness coach, or an executive coach, and all sorts of stuff in between. But for us, coaching has a very specific meaning, which is, in this example, it's about a leadership coach who can help you unlock your potential, ask the difficult questions, and get you to challenge your own mental paradigms around behaviors you currently have. Because when you put people in classrooms, what happens is, they get a 5-step model on how to best innovate, but you can't just tomorrow wake up and start doing those 5 steps every day, because it's not innate. It's not built into how you think. So for us, we go about it through the psychology of human behavior and the psychology of change, and what it takes to change the way people think and to get them to take new action based on new insights that they have, aha moments that they have, realizing that the thing that they've been doing for the last 6 months hasn't worked out, and why am I still doing it that way? There's got to be a better way, right? So it's literally about doing those things in a highly designed, customized, curated way that is superbly aligned to end outcomes, ROIs, and ultimately corporate priorities and the charter of the organization.
And so I guess backing up back to the corporation, you said it starts with understanding what your strategic goals are for the organization. How much of an issue comes to play with organizations trying to do too much at the same time?
That's a really, really great question. I think that ultimately leaders are smart enough to know that you've always got to prioritize, right? But even doing a lot at the same time, it's kind of the nature of how things go in a lot of these companies. Like, there's almost too much to bite and chew off, right? But it's about focused attention. Like, when people are, working through multiple projects, do they have the skills to do that? There's only so much capacity each individual has. Capacity varies from person to person. So the question becomes, how do you increase the capacity of each person in a way that doesn't cause them extra stress, and doesn't kind of, throw them down this hill where they're like, oh, I've got so many things on my plate, and now all these balls are dropping off, right? And I can't catch them. So increasing capacity is such a large part of what we do, which means you're enabling people to manage all the variables, all the components, all the projects, using different mindset, using skills, using tools, using collaboration techniques, optimizing for results. Like one of the things I always think about is it's one thing to take an action and have it result in a outcome, but it's another thing to take an action and have it result in a series of outcomes, right? Like how do you not do the former because the outcome is only one thing? How do you do the latter because the outcome is maybe 10 things, right? Like the power of like these decisions that you make and how much you can accelerate outcomes, it's a mindset, right? It's a strategic point of view. It's about connecting the dots, etc. So I just think it's always constantly going to be about increasing capacity in a way that the individual benefits and really feels like, wow, like I'm supported, I have the benefit from my company who's elevating me, lifting me, and I now love my job even more because I see the impact I'm creating. The company feels like they're getting exactly what they need. And then society on a whole other level is winning too. That's how we look at, balancing priorities, a lot to chew, and just all the things that are going on.
And when you talk about then, I guess at the individual level, and unlocking the potential, that's what's going to help drive that alignment and really helping the organization achieve those goals. What are the things that tend to stand in the way of unlocking potential then for an individual?
Such a great question. So many things. First of all, the culture of the company. We have customers where they tell us like our culture, it's a high performance culture, but at any cost, which means that we have a lot of attrition, people don't stay, right? Like, so the culture really, really matters. And tied into that is psychological safety, whether people feel comfortable sharing ideas, no matter how wild and crazy the ideas are or whatever. And then also belonging, right? And then really around kind of, opportunity to fail and fail fast and fail forward, right? So it really depends on the culture that the company is creating, the practices, the mindset, the core values. Because when these things are not in play, what ends up happening is that you can speak, but you won't be able to walk the talk, right? And so much of it is breaking down those barriers and putting people into safe spaces like we do in group coaching, where they are vulnerable enough to say, look, I've been doing this for the last 6 months and I'm not getting anywhere with it, frankly. Like I keep feeling like I'm failing and it's not helping. And someone else is like, me too, but then I tried this. I think you should give it a go too, right? So like it's a safe container where people are sharing and then they're building trust in the process. They're collaborating. They're even now enhancing their relationships outside of that group coaching relationship, which is for an hour a week, could even be an hour a month. But the point is like breaking down those barriers, giving people those safe spaces, letting them really tap into their potential in a way that accelerates them and the organization is so critical. And I think what's where the barriers start to come in is that leaders aren't always equipped to do that, and they have a ton on their plate, right? Like they're juggling all the things, and it's so hard in between running a big organization to be a coach for everyone, to meet people where they're at in terms of their motivators, their anything and everything, right? Like it's complicated. So that's why like investing in individuals who know how to grow, who are empowered on their own to keep developing, becomes super critical, because then you build a culture where people are coaches to each other, to themselves. They have a growth mindset. They know how to fail fast and fail forward. So the culture and walking the talk becomes such a critical part of it. And then not being too tied to old practices. Like I think companies are so good to say, oh yeah, we do that and it's worked well. Well, maybe you've done it and it's worked well, but if you really look under the cover, is it working well? And is there a better way to do it, right? And that's what happens in learning and development often. They're like, oh yeah, we have an LMS, we run these trainings, we've got it. And we're like, and the ROI is, and they don't know. They have no idea what the ROI is, right? Like you sit in a training for 2 days, you might be inspired to the moon and back, but it doesn't mean you changed anything more than maybe 5% of your behaviors. Not a good use of time, right?
And so how do you measure that then? That's a really interesting concept.
Yeah, so my background has always been as an HR human capital leader. And the thing that I always felt the most embarrassed about was my clients would always ask me, well, I've sent 300 people to training. Like, what's the outcome? And I'm like, I don't know. They're like, what do you mean you don't know? Are they more productive? Are they making better decisions? I'm like, the food was good. They felt like they were inspired by the instructor. It was a healthy, safe space, you know? And they're like, okay. So for me, this was a really big sort of point where we had to solve for it very quickly. So when we first kind of went to market, we were very keen on tying in metrics into the product from the get-go. So we look at ROI from the perspective, from a 360 perspective that takes into account multiple views to ROI. And it's a large part of how we measure, you know, productivity, engagement, purpose, psychological safety. I mean, so many different things, because it's really critical. Like, why would you invest in your people if you don't know what happens after it, right? Like, you should invest having goals in mind. Those goals need to be met or exceeded. And then you continue the investment because you see the direct correlation to your business charter and how everybody wins in the equation.
Yeah, it's really hard on the soft skills, I would think, because, you know, like it's even hard, I suppose, from like soft skills are hard to change. They're so embedded. So, I mean, I guess, do you have advice there? Because, yeah, I mean, I've attended many leadership courses and have tried to put things in practice and find that eventually, you know, it's hard not to fall back into the way you've always done it. You have advice there?
Totally. People, I think, Jenna, what you're talking about is the perfect example of training versus coaching, right? Like, training does not change your psyche and does not fundamentally shift your paradigms and reshape your triggers, because you're getting fed best practices. They mean nothing to you except words on paper. When it's like a psychologist going in and helping you reshape how you think and helping you understand cause and effect, that brings about a whole notion of thinking that's new, because suddenly you're saying, oh, why have I been doing it this way? Oh, wow, there's a new way for me to try this out. You know, so this is really the difference. And then there's a huge difference also between one-to-one coaching and group coaching, because one-to-one is focused just on the individual's needs, where the coach is pushing you further along those needs and that person's agenda, whereas group is focused on the organization's agenda, taking into account a group of people, and within that subset of the group, taking into account the individual. So there's a whole different layer of complexity, but also a layer of learning that accelerates and advances at a whole different level, because suddenly context starts to become that much greater. It's not just you and your world and what you think, it's you and your world, your peers in their world, and how you intermingle with that, and then in the larger scope of the corporate agenda. So it's really, really fascinating what the right type of development can do, and what it takes to kind of get there, you know. So I, like, having been in this space for so long, I'm still so surprised that, you know, companies still run like these big training programs and think that's it. You know, when you become a first-time manager or a first-time director, I mean, that's great. It's a starting point, but it shouldn't be it, right? Like, what's the momentum? How do you keep the stickiness going, right? Like, how do you take that awesome face-to-face experience where people got to meet and touch and shake hands and all of that sort of stuff, and then you keep the momentum going, right? Just like a musician doesn't tune their piano, you know, once. They tune it every 3 to 6 months, because that's how it works in order to play a piano at optimal, you know, hearing capacity and so on. Humans are the same. We have to be tuned continuously for us not to slip back into old behaviors, but for us to keep progressing and moving forward and reshaping our thinking.
And so what does group coaching look like then?
So in our case, we are global pioneers in the space. And then when COVID hit, a lot of companies started following and trying out the group coaching model. Still very different to ours. It's our bread and butter. For us, we have a scientific methodology around how we take the mind apart, how we reconstruct it and piece it back together. We also have a lot of kind of data and metric points around like what happens in that hour in the coaching setting, around kind of best practices around how like how often people should be speaking, what's the right balance, how we cater to the needs of the individual group and the organization, all within an hour. I mean, so many different data points. We have proprietary assessments, as you had asked about before. And then we also have other frameworks and methodologies that we incorporate and build into the whole practice so that it's a very heightened 1 hour, which we call kind of the golden hour. Like, leave all your distractions, come focus, stay in it, and walk away feeling, like, yeah, I've got this. And I've got, one thing I'm going to take out of this as my action item.
Sorry, I had 2 or 3 thoughts at once, and now I can't remember any of them. How do you create then an environment, I guess, when in that group? Because I imagine that, going back to what you said about psychological safety, if you are in a group of peers, I would imagine it becomes even more important to have that safety than if you're opening up about coaching. And so what are some of the things that fosters that environment and kind of sets the stage for that?
So that is all the coach. So this is why, I think what companies forget is that all coaching is not created equal, and all coaches are definitely not created equal. We have set a brand new standard for the industry where we literally have 100% coach matching criteria and success. Like, we've never been asked to replace a coach to date, which is unheard of in this industry. Like, you could probably estimate about 10% of the time that happens. So it's on the coach. It's the methodologies they use. It's the space they create around confidentiality, etc. And we have very, very purposeful ways in which we certify our coaches around how to do that. But there's a whole science and an art to it, that's why, sometimes people think about group coaching as, oh, let's all get together and speak and share thoughts and ideas. That is not how we think about it. We think about it as an hour that is pre-designed for transformation. So the coach has an agenda, they go into the session, and the participant is going through a very kind of structured process, even though they don't realize it, on the back end, that really deconstructs and reconstructs their mind.
And so what are some maybe myths then that people have around this? What are some of the objections that companies might put forth around investing in something like this? And what are the answers to those?
Yeah, so I think some of the myths are, people think that coaching is for when you aren't performing. And so sometimes employees can feel like, oh, I'm getting a coach. It must be that I'm not performing and I'm in trouble, right? Like, it's not anymore. Coaching is a gift and an opportunity, actually. And if your company is willing to invest in you and give you a coach, run with it, take it, So that's on the employee side. And I would say on the organization side, HR is a function that's slow to move. I think since COVID, we've seen it moving faster with more HR members on board seats, etc. But generally, HR tends to be a very kind of slow moving function. Of course, there are nuances to that, and there are very innovative, amazing HR leaders out there. But generally, it's seen as an administrative support function, not an innovative function that's at the table. Depends on the company, of course. So it's really about challenging current models, right? Like, you do the training, great, but then what after, right? And is it a one-time thing or is it ongoing? How are you fine-tuning your people? Even LMSs, learning management systems, we know that 60% of people who go into an LMS don't even complete the course because they're not interesting, right? Like, they're not actually teaching you anything other than you're like, oh, got 2 more credits, great, I'll just add it to my learning plan, right? But what did you learn from it? What are you going to do differently? Probably close to a little / maybe not much. So why are we not, challenging traditional static LMS models, right? And so the way I think about what we do is we are a live LMS and a community of transformation. Instead of people going in and sitting through a static course, or a webinar or whatever, how do we get them to intermingle with other members of the organization, break silos, increase innovation, connection, and really build mindsets that literally change how they behave and change the outcomes for the organization. So it's about a different approach, and then thinking about how to scale that and up level and uplift.
And so what do you find then that Well, maybe how long until organizations might, or a leader might see results in their team or something like that? How long does it take to really, turn maybe a team who's good performers into like a high performance team?
Such a good question. So you can start to see results in 6 weeks. Of course, like that's the minimum we would recommend, but definitely, it's just like the whole idea of like any sport you play, practice and repetition makes you better at it, right? And
Mhm.
so the idea is that how do you give people the chance to keep practicing and repeating and changing their mental models and challenging their own assumptions and so on. So what you really want to do is at least a period of 12 months, but in 6 weeks, you can start to see results, no question. And then the question is like, how do you not do it as a one and done? Because that's the biggest mistake. We do it and we're like, oh, done, okay. But it's about practice, like a sports game, right? Like you've got to keep practicing. So that constant momentum and stickiness becomes really, really important for sustained outcomes and changes.
And then have you been able to then see how that ties to actual, the metrics that companies tend to track, like increased sales or, higher ROI or, more efficiency? I mean, do you see the hard metrics being moved then?
Yeah, so it depends on the company and what they're looking to measure, but we have for sure had organizations and customers tell us that we've decreased their attrition rates and
Mm.
increased their retention rates actually, which was a large focus for a few of our customers around kind of retaining the right people and the top talent that they have in the company. So that was a very clear metric. We've also had engagement increase significantly and also productivity relative to that organization. In some cases, it's hard to measure innovation, but we've also been told that innovation has increased and groups are collaborating that would have normally never not collaborated before. So
Mm.
there's a lot of data. Another thing that we're always fascinated with is how do we tie it into a pulse survey that happens at the organization. I mean, there are lots of people who tell you they fill out a pulse survey, but they don't always share what's really on their mind because they're not sure if that's actually going to be tied back to them or not, right? But like with us, because we're a third party vendor, they're happy to share the real feedback, right? So
Mm.
we can get access to a lot more data sometimes that really ties into what the company or the customer wants to know.
Yeah, and you just mentioned innovation, and you talked about it at the beginning. And I know you're not feeling well, so thank you so much for bearing with us. But um, um, innovation seems to be a hard thing to manage, I guess. I mean, I know there's been a lot of great strategies around creating what are those called, like uh, incubators, separated from the larger companies so that they can innovate, and things like that. But how do you really drive innovation strategically, as a focus for an organization?
Yeah, so then in that case, Jana, our goal would be to create custom products that
Mm.
literally focus on innovation because we're not an off the shelf product. What's
Mm.
amazing about what we do is we're able to hone in on exactly what your needs are and give you that thing. So, for example, we're working with an organization whose goal is to get to 1 billion in the next 4 years. So literally everything we're doing with them is around getting to 1 billion in terms of scale, processes, building for scale and processes to people's mindsets, their behaviors, etc. Right? So for us, it's about honing in on that thing and then making sure that you have a high impact experience and outcomes.
But then, yeah. So, but can you give maybe an example or two, because around like how do you get people in that innovation mindset even? Do you know what I mean? Like, for example, I mean, our company is one where we're like, oh, we would like to come up with our own product. Um, and that's easy to say, but it's like, it goes from all the way from how do you identify where the need is, and then fill the need, and then take that all the way through. Like, so, it seems it's almost like trying to be creative on demand. And that seems hard. So just kind of curious. I mean, I know you guys customize things, but just kind of curious, like, what are some of those things that you do that might be a little different than the way everyone else approaches things?
Yeah. So in your example, basically what you're saying is, I mean, anyone can come up with ideas. You're as good as your idea, right? But
Mm.
ultimately, you're as good as the execution of your idea.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's about taking an idea and taking it to execution. If a customer's goal is that, then we design the whole experience around the process of coming up with ideas, understanding needs, and driving it through to execution. So,
Mm.
to my point about it being for whatever you need, it could be that you're an engineering leader and you're saying that I need to create an innovation think tank so that we come up with new ideas for our customers as part of the product process, right? Product engineering collaboration.
Mm.
So it could be getting everyone into the right mindset of what does that look like? Let's co-create the future of that. What are the checkpoints and balances? Like what's the new type of thinking that's required? So it's not just about what you're doing in the coaching session, which is unraveling your mind and building that next level mindset. Then it's about them taking those new thoughts and those new thinking processes and actually creating the innovation hub or whatever it is or think
Mm-hmm.
tank that they're creating, right? So much of it is action, which is a large part of our focus.
Mm-hmm.
You don't just get to come be in an hour coaching session and then say, "Oh, I loved it," and you leave.
And just go
It's
back
about
to your normal
right.
life.
Exactly. It's about action because if action isn't
Mm.
happening, there is nothing happening.
Mm. Absolutely. Um, and so, I guess, what are do you find that when you come into organizations that do you have to deal with a level of resistance from the people who are attending these sessions?
It's very rare.
Mm.
We kind of run the whole gamut in terms of white glove service end to end, which also means crafting the communications for our customers.
Mm.
So we know how to craft them in a way that creates a lot of excitement. So people know that this is a unique opportunity. They've probably never had a one-to-one coach, leave alone had access to group coaching, which is so much more fun because into one-to-one coaching, if you don't have an agenda, you're like, oh, do I need to show up? I'll cancel it. Whereas with group, you show up anyways because there's so many participants at the table, right, to learn from. So
Mm.
for us, like we've just mastered kind of this whole notion of like how to get people excited about the opportunity and really help them understand that it's a gift and they know it is. Sometimes people will be apprehensive though. Maybe it's a scientist or an engineer and they're very right brain focused and they're like, just tell me the 3 ways to do it. Like, I don't want to talk about it. Give me the 3 best practices. And that's not what coaching is. So they have to learn to tap into and lean into a new modality of learning, which is part of the challenge and part of the excitement. And then they come out on the other side and they're like, I love that. That was so cool. I'm thinking very differently about things now. So it can be challenging just from a pure left or right brain thinking perspective versus anything else. But we don't usually reach apprehension per se. It's more or less like this is a new modality of learning. Like, how do I get the most out of this? I'm not quite sure because I've never done this before. But that's our
Mm.
job to get you to the other side.
Yeah. I had a really cool experience and I can't even remember the name of the company that did it. I mean, obviously I know the company I worked for and they called the program, but I think it was the name of the program, like I think our company named it, right, was Leading for the Future. And it had such a huge impact on me. And I don't even think it definitely wasn't as involved as even what you're talking about. So I can imagine that it would be even more powerful. But it was one of those turning points for my career because we were forced into these groups. We had to get together 3 times in a 6-month period or something all together on site, like flying into headquarters type of arrangement and spend a couple of days together or maybe longer. I don't know. But like some of the activities they did, we were given something like you have to figure out who maybe it's a secret agent. You have to figure out who the secret agent is and get them to this place all before they die or something. And it was all about like the team building and the solving the clues, but beyond that, it was actually the feedback afterwards. So what was the team dynamic? Who kind of took the lead and how did they show up? And was it effective? And, so it wasn't actually about winning. It was around, really analyzing how you behaved in that type of environment. And so that was one. And then another one was something where we were given, I'm a project manager. We weren't all project managers though, but it was about like, you're trying to do a project and it was like a scavenger hunt at the same time. And so basically you were scavenger hunting for all the pieces to execute this project. But you were only given partial information because that's how life is, right? Like that you only get partial information. And so you had to actually plan, you had like 5 minutes to plan your strategy, but then you were thrown for a loop. Sometimes there'd be a change request or a change, there were, the requirements were changed or something. Excuse me. But it was a really, really impactful experience. And yeah, I really loved it. So I can imagine that, what you're talking about would have some, like the same type of impact as the end result.
Totally. I mean, these are experiences. I love the one that you shared around analyzing your behaviors. And that's what coaching is actually all the time with imperfect information, right? Like a ton of ambiguity and leaning into it. And these are experiences people never forget. They propel them forward for years and years to come, right? Like they're going to at one point say, oh, I remember when I was at Salesforce and I had access to group coaching, and oh my gosh, that changed my entire trajectory, right? Like these are those pivotal moments in someone's life if they're willing to step into it and to lean into it, right? Which our job is, if they're not, to get them there, right? To show them how that the power of transformation can actually work for them. So yeah, I mean, the more organizations look into these types of experiences as being not just the thing that you do that's additional, but this should be the table stake ground foundational experience, because that's how you want to spend your time and resources to get to high ROI. Like that's what it should look like.
Yeah. Well, this has been a really great conversation. I'd love to know what you want to leave top of mind with our audience.
Oh my gosh, so much to say here, but I would say top of mind, I would say challenge your way of thinking around development, around what it takes to really win as a company, and especially in today's era, right? Like where people come to the table with a lot more needs than they ever have. Like managers are meant to be psychologists, coaches, all sorts of things in between as well. And so challenge what has worked really well and ask yourself, is there a better way to do it that would ease your resource restrictions, your costs, and ultimately increase your ROI and accelerate your ability to get to end outcomes and organizational charters faster.
Excellent. And how can folks learn more about what you do and where to get in contact?
Yeah, absolutely. You can come to our website, which is humanq.com. You could also email me, Nishika@humanq.com or info@humanq.com. But would love a conversation, even if you just want to brainstorm. Happy to chat.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been great having you on the call.
Great, Jenna. Thank you so much. It's been so fun. I really appreciate your time as well.
And to our audience, until next time, keep your organizations healthy.